All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to this community meeting about the Heritage Square project. My name is Scott Charney. I'm the planning director, and I've worked for the city since 1989. And one of the hallmarks of the planning process here in Signal Hill is community engagement. And what it's intended to do is to demonstrate how much value we put in your input and your participation in our process. But it's important to emphasize that we're just at the beginning of the process at this point. This stage is informal. This is not a public hearing. There are no decision makers in the room, and there's going to be no decision made tonight. I would like to begin by acknowledging that there have been some misreporting in the media about the status of the project. The city has not approved the project. Up to this point, there's only been two actions taken. One was the execution of the contract for the project's EIR. And then secondly, approval of a document called an exclusive negotiating agreement, which is between the city and Signal Hill Petroleum, essentially a legal tool related to the possible sale of city-owned property as a part of this process. A map showing the location of city-owned property and the laundry list of entitlements necessary to be completed before this project could be reasonably considered approved will be shown later in the presentation. The purpose of the meeting is to share information and to get public comment before the formal process begins. Here are some simple ground rules that we'd like to keep employed to ensure that the meeting stays on track and is productive. We understand that you do have questions, you have concerns and comments, and we're here to help you navigate the process. So let's agree to maintain a civil environment, and please avoid name calling and the like. There are a lot of people here tonight. We want to give as many people as possible the opportunity to speak. If you're interested in speaking, hopefully you've already filled out a speaker card and submit it to a staff person. Our Deputy City Manager, Hannah Haydoorn, will be pulling names out of the collective hat, and she will randomly pull 3 names at a time for people to approach the podium, stand in a single file line, and each speaker speaks one at a time. In order to ensure that everybody gets the chance to speak, we're going to limit speaking tonight to 3 minutes. At the 2-minute mark, we'll raise a card to just let you know that there's 1 minute remaining. At that point, if you had questions that you think we might be able to answer, we can use the last minute to try to respond, either from the developer or city staff or our consultant, or you can continue to make your comments to the 3-minute mark. I think it's important to acknowledge that we're not likely to answer every question tonight. We're at the very beginning of the process. So we anticipate the need for a second community meeting. We don't know when that is, but it will be to share further information and to respond more fully to any inquiries that are made tonight. We'll make sure that anybody who's on our list that came tonight will get notification of that second meeting. And if you receive notice of this meeting, you'll certainly receive notice of that meeting. And I would also point out, anybody who doesn't, if we run out of time tonight, get the opportunity to speak, you'll have priority at the next community meeting. So we're going to begin the plan or the meeting with the presentation from Signal Hill Petroleum. They're the developers. Then the city's EIR consultant will have the floor. He's technically conducting what's called the scoping meeting for compliance with state law regarding environmental impacts. And then the last part of the meeting will be a planning staff member to talk about the planning process. At the end of each segment, there will be opportunities for questions and comments, and then you can see on this roadmap we've embedded most of the time to the developer's presentation and also for questions and comments. I will indicate, because the EIR consultant's part is a mandated part, we'll ask that during that discussion that people that have environmental related questions focus their questions at that point. But any time during Any comments prior to that, the environmental consultant will make note of those as the regular meeting moves on. There are two other planners in the room tonight, Colleen in the back and Ryan here. They're helping me. We also have the Deputy City Manager, Hannison Haydorn, and also the Economic Development Manager, Elise McCaleb, here representing city staff. Randy Nichols is the environmental consultant, and I'll now turn over the presentation to Signal Hill Patrol.
Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Deborah Russell, and I'm Vice President of Community Relations and Real Estate Operations for Signal Hill Petroleum. I've worked in the Signal Hill community for over 12 years. I'm a resident of Signal Hill, and I'm also a Parks and Recreation Commissioner for the City of Signal Hill. But tonight, I'm speaking on behalf of the developer, Signal Hill Petroleum. So with that, I'd like to introduce my team. I've got Kevin Laney, who is Vice President of Real Estate and Development. Lauren Coombs, Real Estate Development Manager for Heritage Square, and she is also a resident of Signal Hill. Maris DiPasquale, she's a consultant with us for Heritage Square. And John Moreland with KTGY, an award-winning architecture design firm, world-class all over the U.S., and he's also a resident of Cal Heights and has a very vested interest in this project as well. We've also got some team members in the audience who will be taking very detailed notes of questions and comments and concerns to make sure that we address them as well. So I'd like to start with anybody that's following the retail market trend today knows that the rules of retail are being redefined. The traditional shopping methods are at a crossroad, and reinvention is a critical part of remaining relevant. Increasingly, the retail shopping environment has trended towards mixed-use concepts where living, shopping, experience, open space, and connectivity all intersect. And the trends that are critical to successful projects like this are: one, experiential gastronomy, meaning really innovative food at these mixed-use projects. Another is the great outdoors. And what that is integrating exteriors and interiors and creating really neat gathering spaces. Placemaking through landscape, which is creating an environment that people want to visit and return to. Another is brand expressions, meaning that the retailers have the freedom to show off their brands and their image. Mixed use, which is seamlessly integrating with their lifestyles, and that's living and working and relaxing. And then also brand destinations, so creating a shopping center that really brings out emotions and responses from its visitors, and that it creates memories that will last a lifetime and make them want to revisit again. We believe that the proposed Heritage Square project has all of those things that are critical to a successful project. And with that, I'd like to show you a 3D video that we put together that really gives you a good sense and feel about the project. This is on YouTube as well and available to see. This is going westbound on Skyline with Home Depot to your right and crossing Cherry Avenue. And as you can see, the corner of that space does allow for connectivity from the hill through the shopping center. A two-story view-oriented restaurant and a Main Street type feel, which could be used for art walks and gathering spaces. There's a community space in the center of the project that you see here, and to the left with the lights, there's an open roofed gathering space as well. This is Crescent Heights and turning on Rose Avenue. The corner piece to the left is not a part of the project. There are 4 single-family home residents that are used to transition the project, with the luxury residential behind it. This will be turning onto Burnett. And then again crossing that main street. This large open space area will be used as a community gathering space as well. This is on Cherry, turning back onto Crescent Heights, with Mother's Market, our new anchor tenant there. There's existing office buildings to the right, and again turning onto Main Street. These are the residential units facing Main Street with some small retail and services embedded in them. And we're going to be ending at a beautiful historic mural where you can sit and have coffee and talk to your neighbors and friends. So that is a little bit about Heritage Square. And I would like to begin our presentation and talking about the details of the project as they are today. You'll hear later on in our presentation that the details have evolved through community meetings and many meetings that we've had over the years. But as we know it today, we'll be talking about it. So I'd like to start with who is Signal Hill Petroleum and why are we developing a retail center? Well, Signal Hill Petroleum is a privately held oil and gas company, and we own and operate the majority of what's called the Long Beach oil field, which is primarily under Signal Hill and parts of Long Beach. Our main business is oil and gas production, but we're also real estate developers. The owners of Signal Hill Petroleum were developers in Orange County prior to creating Signal Hill Petroleum about 30 years ago. We have a unique expertise in balancing oil production and real estate development. It's very unique to our city, and most people do not have, or most developers do not have that expertise, which we do. Some of the real estate projects that we've done throughout the city are the homes on the hilltop. There are several communities up there. Town Center West, which you see on your top left. Signal Hill Gateway, which is the shopping center on Spring and Atlantic, where we brought Applebee's and Chipotle and Starbucks and Ross and many other tenants there. And then also Mother's Market, which is now open and one of the incredible anchor tenants to future development here in Signal Hill. I'll talk a little bit more later about how difficult it was to get them, but how excited we are to have them here in our community. This map shows some of our real estate footprint throughout the city. And again, starting with the hilltop, there's Promontory Estates, Skyline Estates, and West Bluff Estates that we partnered with the home developer to bring those homes here. Heritage Square is in the red square, and that's the project that we're talking about tonight. Crescent Square, the new homes that were built, we aggregated that property and entitled it, and then sold it to a home developer, which are the homes that you have there. And then further up the map, there's an industrial project on Spring and Orange that is in the city of Long Beach, but along the same path that we're looking at, all the way to Signal Hill Gateway, which we just talked about. Timeline of the site that we're talking about tonight. Back in 1922, the first oil well was drilled on that property. And oil drilling happened all the way through 1950s. So as you all remember or have seen the historic photos, there are many, many wells, not only on this property, but throughout Signal Hill. In 1959, the warehouse, these air conditioning warehouses were built on this site and remained until recently, until Signal Hill Petroleum just brought them down. There was issues with transients, and I think there was a recent fire there, so we did take them down and cleaned up the area. In 2001, the Signal Hill General Plan identified Heritage Square as a central business district. In 2009, Signal Hill Petroleum acquired most of the property around the project area. In 2011, the city of Signal Hill acquired the remainder of the property. In 2015, most of us remember when Fresh and Easy closed. It was one of the last stores to close in the district. And in 2017, we hired KTGY to start concept and vision planning for Heritage Square. And in 2018, we brought Mother's Market to Signal Hill. And this was no easy task. Although Fresh and Easy did well, it's still closed. And bringing Mother's here was difficult because of many reasons. Specifically, there's a lot of vacant land still in the area. So as they look at the history of some of the tenants there, there wasn't a lot of proven track record there. There needs to be more people in areas that they want to build stores in. And it's not only Mother's, but it's any future tenant, and it's a lot of our past tenants that we brought to Signal Hill. Now they came and they're doing well, but as we want to attract different types of retailers, people are going to make a big difference here, and that means housing here in our city. We worked diligently with Mother's to highlight the benefits of our community, and we also made a very large financial commitment to the build out of the store. So now Mother's Market paid for the construction, but Signal Hill Petroleum paid for a lot of what's called the tenant improvements and the exterior of the building. And we did that because we knew bringing them here would be very, very important to bringing the new types of tenants and amenities that many of our community members say they want and need and would like to have in our city. And then also after many negotiations, we finally had a deal. We brought them to our city. We're excited to have them, and they're now the anchor tenant for future development, but they're also what's bringing other tenants being able to get excited about coming here is the fact that Mother's took that leap of faith, and which means there's a possibility for them as well to do well here. So with that, I'd like to invite John Moreland up, our architect, to talk a little bit about what he's done for the project, and why he did it, how he did it, and some of the details.
Thank you, Deborah. As Deborah mentioned, I'm John Moreland. I'm with KTGY Architecture Planning. We're the architects and planners on the project. As Deborah mentioned as well, I'm a Cal Heights resident, so when Signal Hill, when we were approached by Signal Hill Petroleum about this project, I jumped at it to have something just right across on the other side of the 405 freeway from me. I love the city of Signal Hill and I love the city of Long Beach, and I just wanted to see just something great going here and have involvement in this type of project. I'm just ecstatic about. But I do want to kind of give you a little rundown about essentially how we established the vision for the project and how we kind of come up with the proposed architecture that you see in our renderings and on the boards. When we look at it, we do a lot of research. We look at the site itself. We look at the context of where is it in the city's history, and things of that nature. And when we looked at it, Signal Hill has really a deep history. There's just to name a few: the Nob Hill, then the discovery of oil, and then it became known as Porcupine Hill, but then the current nature that it is today. And really for this project. The couple of things that stood out is one, when we did our research with the land use element that's in the city's general plan, the land use element did state that this Heritage Square is going to be the central business district for the city, and it identifies it as a mixed-use commercial and residential area. And another thing that came out is this exhibit that you see here, this 2001 vision plan specifically for Heritage Square. I want to share kind of, in this vision plan, there were 6 goals that were identified in this vision plan that I just kind of want to go over that really kind of spoke to and developed the framework that we eventually wish to implement. One is a mixed-use complex, including economically feasible commercial and residential and cultural uses. 2, maximize the enjoyment of the site's spectacular views. 3, high-end yet dense residential development to support the mix of commercial and cultural uses. 4, buildings organized in a clearly defined streets or plazas intended for shared uses and pedestrian linkages. So it means that there's pedestrian connectivity within the district itself. 5, designed to complement the adjacent historic district and to provide character and identity to the city as a whole. And then item number 6 is the recognized Signal Hills Petroleum heritage and include art essentially celebrating that history as well. And on this site too, when we were looking at the former warehouse buildings on there, that really kind of spoke to us in terms of the architectural materials and the architectural design specifically for the commercial portion of it. And as you see in this picture of the vision plan, there's a large community gathering space and artwork in the middle of it. And going to the next exhibit, that also shows a large community gathering space, pedestrian connections kind of going to the left and the right of the mixed-use building in the background, and then also artwork that really identifies oil legacy of Signal Hill. So that's 2001. This is kind of where we went to today. So those 6 key principles, the 6 goals that were identified in that vision plan, we believe are still true today, and we're reflecting the design inspiration for the project. These 6 images, I'm going to start in the lower right-hand corner. This is the inspiration, and there's the laser. This is the inspiration for the individual commercial buildings. Very similar to the original, inspired by the original City Hall building for the city of Signal Hill. Pretty much simple gable massing, but also include standing seam and metal siding and metal elements for the commercial area. In the middle, these 2 images are the inspiration for the residential buildings. We don't want to have just a building that has no character, that's just a large box. We want to have something that's articulates, it has large expansive windows, it has projecting roofs, something that creates shadow and is interesting along the street scene, not something just flat plain. And in the lower left-hand corner, community elements such as this one to take a public space to kind of take advantage of the views in the area. In the upper left-hand corner, Deborah mentioned in the fly-through video, kind of an open-air community space. We really envision this as a flexible space. One project I'm sure most of you are aware of is Steelcraft, which is a great project by where I live. But one of the flaws of that is the open space, and that's pretty narrow and it's pretty tight. And it's also during the summer it gets pretty hot, so we wanted to have something that could be indoor, outdoor, that's covered, that could provide protection from the elements. And if there's a larger community event, art walk, or outdoor yoga or something, if it needs be, it can expand into the uncovered area. And then last but certainly not least, in the upper right-hand corner is the residential. Our inspiration for the residential takes cues from the historic district. We envisioned the 4 single-family residential to be compatible with the architectural design guidelines for the historic district, and they'll provide a transition into the district itself. And then this slide, anyone can read that, great, but it is page number 2 in your packet. I'm going to start at the bottom. This is the main street scene. Imagine that you're in the Mother's Market parking lot with your back towards Cherry, looking at the building. The way we wanted this building to look is something as if it was developed organically, not some, as I mentioned before, not a large box. We really want to have different character at different points in the building. So when you're closer to Burnett Street over here to the south, there's retail. You have double height windows. You have kind of a large service retail that you can walk into, pretty large expanse of glass. And this retail will be projecting out with the residential setback behind it to provide interest along the street scene. And then as we're continuing through the garage entry, it transitions to a two-story loft unit. This would be similar to like a brownstone in New York City, where you have steps going up to the units. So it has a really intimate character to it. And then we have the cafe with the historic mural there. And the inspiration for that mural not only did it look great on the plan itself, but it's also it serves as a visual terminus. When you pull into Cherry Avenue at the existing entrance that's there for Mother's Market that exists right now, that view will be at your view when you pull in. So that would create a nice visual terminus. But then as we transition to the right, we still have some lofts, but then it also transitions to residential units to give a more residential character as you get closer to Crescent Heights Street. Now going to the Rose Avenue Street scene. I did want to point out too on the Main Street. We wanted to really, the inspiration in terms of the materials and the design was to really reflect the oil legacy, and I mentioned the sanding seam, the metal. It's also going to include brick and also the flat roofs and parapet roofs. But when we transition over to the Rose Avenue Street scene, it becomes more traditional in character. The roof elements step down. It includes more gabled roof. The material on the Rose Avenue Street scene is lap siding, stucco, and also includes stone elements. And then to further transition into the historic district or the 4 single-family homes, which would be in the foreground, setback from Rose Avenue in front of the mixed-use building. So now to speak more about the plan itself, I'm going to transfer it over to Morris. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Again, Maris DePasquale. I had the pleasure of meeting some of you hopefully I'll get to talk to in the future. We're going to start with the development constraints on the site. And so this slide here shows you can see it's Cherry here on the right, Burnett on the bottom of the slide, and that's Crescent Heights at the top. What this shows you, those black dots are wells. There are currently a number of wells throughout the property, and the color on the site represents the consolidation of ownership. So currently the white portion of the site is owned by Signal Hill Petroleum. The green represents what the city owns, and Deborah talked a little bit about that, the exclusive negotiating agreement. And then this corner parcel here, which is Rose and Crescent Heights, that's not a part of our project. That is a separate ownership, another party. So to talk about the wells, there are 27 wells on site. One of them is still active and it will remain active. Some of these wells have been abandoned. Those will be re-abandoned as part of the project's process, and then the wells that are not yet abandoned will be abandoned. So everything will be abandoned at today's current standards, and Signal Hill Petroleum has expertise in doing this type of thing, as well as has a little sense for what's already on the ground out there, having done 2 wells as part of the Mother's Market development. Another thing that I think is important, in addition to bringing the technical expertise of what's involved with abandoning an oil field, is some of the due diligence that was done on this site. There was extensive front-end work done in terms of geotechnical resources, and a comprehensive fault study was done that cleared the site of any earthquake faults that would hinder future development. That work has already all been completed. And then one other component here, this parcel here, which is currently a city parcel. I know there's been some talk in the community about a park, And we had, as the applicant, have committed to replace that parcel in Signal Hill, the city of Signal Hill, with a like-for-like parcel. And then what you see down the middle right here, this is Gardena, so I didn't mention that earlier. But let's talk about the site plan. This is in your handout. This is arguably what you're all here to talk about. It's the most important slide we're going to talk about tonight. And I want to mention that what's before you tonight is after multiple iterations. Some of you may have seen other site plans that have been in the public record. There was one with the negotiating agreement. It has evolved considerably over the last 2 years. And over the last 2 years, Signal Hill Petroleum has met with our immediately adjacent neighbors, the broader community, the city, and so what you see before you tonight represents input from multiple stakeholders as well as the city. So again, same layout. This is Cherry on the right, Burnett on the bottom, Crescent Heights on the top, and you would have Gardena somewhere in the middle, which is being replaced with Main Street, and then over here on the left would be Rose, and this portion here is the not apart. Lighter pink building is the existing Mother's Market. So let's just start from left to right. We didn't start with these 4 single-family detached units on Rose Avenue. We started with the multifamily residential coming all the way over to Rose and heard that that was not preferred. So in an attempt to create a transition, we've created these 4 single-family detached homes, which I think John went over the architecture and the character and how those will be developed, to act as a transition to then get here to the multifamily building. So that sets back the multifamily building anywhere between 70 and 120 feet. Now, some of you may have seen prior site plans. They varied in how the multifamily was presented. One was as high as 5 stories. This building is now a combination of 3 and 4 stories. It's been dropped 2 stories in a lot of places. I call them fingers, little pieces that stick out. That's the part of the building where majority of it's been lowered to 3 stories, and then you have the 4th story set further back. And it wraps around this white area here in a parking structure, completely concealing the parking structure. So we've got a 3 to 4 story building set back, I'm speaking from Rose now, anywhere between 70 and 120 feet from the back of curb. As we move over to the Burnett and Cherry corner, we've got 29,000 square feet of new retail and restaurant proposed. So to just give you a sense for what 29,000 square feet is, if you were to take Mother's Market, double it in size, and then divide it into handful of restaurants, some eateries, some boutique retail, that's 29,000 square feet. And so we've got this mixed use square plan and site plan, and I think we're hearing a lot about why mixed use and why mixed use on this site. It really is what the general plan has envisioned. More importantly, it's what's a viable project. It's what the market's demanding right now. And as Deborah mentioned, Mother's Market came with an understanding that this project was in the process. And both Mother's Market and these future tenants here are going to need these residents to help them be successful. So Mother's Market is the primary tenant here. The secondary tenant, we're calling the second primary anchor, is here, and that is a 2-story view restaurant. And then we've got other, in that same square area, the green and the brown are the community plaza, and the brown is a covered area. We've got innovative craft food, beverage establishments, smaller format quick restaurants, coffee shops, beer and wine tasting, similar to Steelcraft, although John gave them a bad time. And then over here we've got more personal services, boutiques, tailors, hair salons, that kind of retail. We're not looking to attract national tenants. We are looking to attract local, small-based retail. You've got the existing, I'm going to go real quick here, access into Mother's that's current. You've got a primary access to the retail would be here off Cherry, another access here off Burnett, and then a second access off Crescent Heights, which would primarily serve and function as an entry for the residents' entrance into the parking garage, which is here. This is the other entry to the parking garage for retail as well as others visiting the site. And so right now, I'm going to close with the parking. completely satisfies and fulfills the city's requirement. Each unit will have 2 parking spaces. And I know that's been a point we wanted to make sure we covered tonight. And then real quick, I will close and hand it back off to Deborah with, in terms of off-site improvements, along Rose, we didn't want to ignore this last edge. So we're working with this property owner to have landscaping that's cohesive and improved all the way up and around the corner there. There'll be improvements along Burnett on both sides to clean that up and make that serve as really a primary entry for the retail and the restaurants and create a sense of destination and place. And then on the corner of Rose and Crescent Heights over here, there's a current tank farm that's going to come down, and that'll be cleaned up as well. So I'm going to hand it back off to Deborah, and she's going to close for our comments this evening.
Thank you, Meredith. So quickly, I'd just like to talk a little bit about our outreach that we've done so far. We've probably been talking about this project to the community for the past 2 years, but formally, we have had some meetings with our immediate neighbors, the historic district. We've had small neighborhood meetings. Up on the hill, we've had a few. And over in the Signal Hill North Neighborhood Association, we've done outreach, civic outreach, and did a presentation with the Signal Hill Chamber of Commerce. We've met individually with commissioners and council members. And then other Signal Hill groups we're actively working with and reaching out to HOAs, condos, apartments, other home groups, and any group that might be interested in this project, we absolutely would want to meet with them either individually as a group. We've also created a Facebook page, which the address is on your handout. And in conclusion, we'd like to say that this project is going to revitalize an underutilized area. So many of our residents say, we finally will have something, or could have something that we can shop in and eat and spend time in instead of taking our dollars outside of Signal Hill. So we're really excited about this project and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, so at this point, the Deputy City Manager will draw 3 names from our hat. Please come forward and create a single file line.
Gary Severns, Paula Williams, and Stacy Blevins.
Gary Severns, I own the house at 1790 East Burnett Street. Probably one of the later rivals to Signal Hill, but when I saw that house and bought it about 6-7 years ago to redo, I firmly believed in the historical plan that you had presented to me. And I'd like to go on record that I think the historical plan should be followed as it was presented. And if there are going to be apartments there, there should be condos and have the pride of ownership of a different class of occupants. And that's pretty much what I want to say. Stick to the historical plan.
Got it? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paula Williams. I'm at 1750 Summit Drive. I'm one of the newer residents that are here. I'm in the big yellow house that's in Crescent Square. The reason why I moved over here was moving away from an area that had a lot of apartments, people that really didn't have a concern for the community. It was apartments, condos, townhomes, single-family homes. So I was moving away from that type of living. I was moving to where there was single-family homes. There were condos across the street, but what I was seeking was a quiet street, which Crescent Heights is right now. And if you build this with 199 residences that all have cars, and there are 2 parking spaces for each one, so let's double that to 400 cars going up and down Crescent Heights. My bedroom and everything's facing Crescent Heights, so now I've just multiplied the noise, the small construction of large vehicles going up and down that Crescent Heights Street. He said you're putting another parking entrance spot on Crescent Heights, so that means that now I've got so much traffic going up and down that street. And that's what I moved here to avoid. I did not spend 7 figures to come over here and live down the street from the apartment complex. I do own a building downtown, a condo downtown, that have been built as apartments and been converted to condos, and the quality of construction is not what I would expect. And my understanding is this may start out as apartments and then you move it to condos. I still don't want 400 cars going on the guns. So I'm concerned about that environmental impact. And truly, I'm concerned about the noise. I understand that you want to bring more businesses there, more people there from Mother's Market, but not that many. 200 is too many. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening, my name is Stacy Blevins. I'm a small business owner and an attorney. I just moved into Crescent Heights back in August. And like my neighbor Paula, actually that was my main concern that I was going to speak to. I left a $1 million home in San Pedro. The reason I left it was because of the apartments that were nearby and the traffic that was on the street. I purposely sought out the home here on Crescent Heights, much like my fellow neighbor, because I was told that there was going to be a commercial complex there, not apartment buildings. I don't want to just reiterate what she said, so just to speak to a different issue that I also have, one of my concerns is if that land is for the public good, I can understand the benefit that would be derived from some of the commercial properties, the restaurants, the retail boutiques, and so forth. However, I have a great concern with the apartment buildings because they are, while they're great for the individual tenants who will be residing in them, they don't really provide a whole lot of tax base or interest for the other people in the neighborhood that are around the area. And again, I don't want to reiterate what was already said, but my main concern as well as the traffic. Like my neighbor, I'm right on Crescent Heights. I see mothers from my bedroom window. The idea of having 400 cars drive past my bedroom at all hours of the evening is something that frankly gives me pause and makes me want to sell my house. And I literally have only been here 4 months, but I'll find another neighborhood to move to rather than have to live with that. And my main concern, if we're going to have that kind of thing, in addition, is that I would prefer single-family residences. The 4 that you proposed, I think, are perfectly legitimate and reasonable. Even condos would provide some kind of an investment interest for the city, and it would also give the tenants, or I should say the residents, in those condominiums, an ownership interest in the city that apartment dwellings just don't simply provide. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Robert Dominguez, Douglas Lewis, and Paul Norton.
Hi, Robert Dominguez, property owner at 1604 Crescent Heights. Owner since 1980. We are pleased to see the commercial developments going in on Cherry, finally. We lived at the home for 6 years. My son and his family live there now with our grandchildren. Clearly, we have a vested interest and a concern over the development. We too would like very much to see home ownership as opposed to apartments. The elevations that we have seen and that you showed demonstrate, at least in my view, that 4 stories still is too tall. Secondly, and perhaps importantly for both the city as well as the neighbors, is we've yet to see the good financial data that demonstrates the need for the commercial to be supported by the residential nearby. There is a significant amount of residential already there, including the 22 units that have just been completed and that the previous speakers have just mentioned where they now reside. We also have a significant amount of access concern over the majority of, well, as I see it, almost 100% of the traffic being dumped onto Crescent Heights from the apartments. Burnett would be a much more reasonable roadway with fewer residential units are going to be impacted by the traffic, both morning and evening, with people traversing out to go to work in the mornings and then evenings coming back in. I am pleased to see that the parking has been improved from 1.5 to 2 spaces per unit. Thank you very much for that. In short, we look forward, my family and I, to see the commercial development take place. We'd like to see it perhaps even expanded beyond what is currently being proposed. And again, with respect to the residential, there's a need to find out what the financial need is for that proportionately to support the commercial that is being undertaken. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, Doug Lewis, 2435 and 2445 Rose. Of course, this is going to be right to the east of us. It's too dense. 199 units is too much. Too many cars. It's going to be looming over those 4 homes you want to build in front of us. If you noticed in the video, those homes are right there. But something else nobody has mentioned is this parking structure is 6 stories. Where is that in the illustration? Is that going to be towering over everything? We have a view toward the hill, which we appreciate and we love to keep. Also, we walk the dogs regularly, and we take that strip that goes between the new homes and the office buildings towards Food for Less. It's a mess. There's trash always around, blowing all over the place. And every time I ask somebody, it's not their problem. It's not their department. Nobody takes responsibility for it. And anyhow, we like our little neighborhood, and we are all for the commercial. It's great, but I think the 199 units is just way too dense. I'd like it all commercial. First of all, we'd also not want to be giving up any part of our historic district, which will be taking 50, 70 feet out to build this towering structure in the backyards of these 4 homes we proposed. And how do you get around an area that is on the California earthquake map is not buildable as to now buildable? Who do you pay to give you that option? So, anyhow. And you say there's going to be a cafe in the middle of all this, but I know there's some restrictions from Mother's Market about what you could build around them to not compete with them too much. So I'd like to know what those rules are that they've put in place. Also, I don't think you're going to need these 199 apartments to keep this in business, because you have 60,000 cars a day going up and down Cherry. I think you have plenty of road business. Thank you.
Well, my name is Paul Norton. I've been a resident of Single Hill for 8 years, and I live at 2205 Ohio Avenue. When people ask me, how do I like living in Signal Hill? And I say, well, I don't feel connected to it. I mean, I like the trails, but the national restaurants, and I call it a food desert. I feel like I'm in a food desert. So I'll appreciate having the higher end foods, or the food, or a wine bar or something like that. I'll enjoy that. And then to reiterate what some other people have said, I'm for more of the condos. It does take, people take more pride in ownership in there. Where I live, there's a lot of college kids, and I see the street messes on the streets for the renters. I know it's important to have renters. We have to balance it out between owners. And so that's something that I'll be concerned about, but I'm happy to see that the parking seems to be expanded. I was waiting to hear how if people are going to use the scooters to go to work or catch the bus, which is unrealistic. And so that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Pam Dutch Hughes, Joe Holliday, and James Cadiz.
I live at 2011 Drive, and I'm very excited to have the historic development. But I wanted people to come not to a good restaurant, to have a good restaurant, but I want them to leave with something historical about our city. And I don't know if you can do a changing venue type of thing, but I think I don't want it to just be another nice restaurant. I want it to have the feel of Signal Hills past, and that people are always being surprised with learning new details of it. And I wish we had more of that space for the commercial development. I'm not too happy about the apartment portions. And I do think condos versus apartments would make the environment more stable. And really want that historical touch. Thank you.
I'm Joe Holliday, and I live in the historic greenhouse at 1650 Crescent Heights Street. And I'd like to reiterate what Pam just said. I'm a co-member and former officer of the Historical Society. And this structure, the apartment structure, in no way reflects the historic nature of the adjoining historic district. It's the only one in the city. It's about the only thing mentioned in the city code for historic resources. So the city has recognized in the past its importance. I also want to point out the fact that everybody's happy that the parking has gone up to 2 spots per unit, but if you Google it, the average renter household size in Signal Hill is 3.1. It's not 2. Okay, so it's unrealistic to assume there's only 2 cars. So when people talk about almost all the traffic from the apartment and pouring onto our poor little 4-block street, Crescent Heights Street, and we're not talking 400 cars, we're talking up to 600 cars. So, but I want to spend most of my time here talking about the ethical parts of this development. Okay, not only does Signal Petroleum have been given an exclusive right to develop, which is, we are wondering, and we've been asking for 15 months, why did they get the exclusive right when there's most developments in the public lands have bidding and things like that. But as you saw in the map, excellent map earlier that showed the green areas, over 75% of the apartment building space that is getting 100% unanimous disapproval from the community, as you can tell tonight. We have 100% unanimous opposition to the apartment building. And 75% is public land. You saw it. I'm not making it up. It's right there. Thank you very much, whoever put that up. That doesn't even include the street. Gardena Street's that white strip in the middle, and they are going to be given a public street, and the whole thing, so that doesn't even show green. So that's why I say it's probably closer to 80% if you do the math. Okay, and included in that 80% is a city redevelopment agency land that hasn't been mentioned too much tonight. And the city redevelopment land is supposed to be for the public good. Closing off an area where only 200 units full of people can walk is not public land. It will be gated and not open to the public. It doesn't matter what it looks like and how pretty it is, but it's public land. And worse, the public park that has already been mentioned would be given to the oil company for private gain. We estimate that their rents will bring in $500,000 a month to the oil company, and we would be losing our local public park, which most people don't even know exists.
Thank you, Mr. Holliday.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, my name is James Cadiz, and I'm one of the residents of the new development over here, the Crescent Square project. And clearly, as all of my neighbors have expressed, and many more of them will, and many of the people that live in the immediate area, there are a considerable amount of concerns associated with the project that is being taken on. I think that the concerns are clearly legitimate. I believe that there is a lot of emotion that's generated because of this project, and I think that that emotion is well-founded because the residents that have made their expressions, their formal expressions and informal, of course, amongst all of us, they're based on the fact that this is the place where they live, right? So I think that in this situation, I come to simply make a very straightforward, very direct request. I have the privilege of being the very first board member of our HOA, and I also have the privilege of being able to have a unique voice in the city of Signal Hill. And one of the things that I find myself doing on somewhat of a regular basis is encouraging as much truth as possible to come out. And truth is not just simply saying, I'm not going to lie and I'm going to tell you the truth. Truth also involves being able to provide the kind of data that supports or substantiates a particular claim made by both sides, right? The sword is a double-edged sword. And so we have people that are on the residential side that are making claims concerning the potential destructive elements associated with noise and traffic and so on and so forth. And I think that there is some reasonable data to support some of those conclusions. There's a lot of emotion that goes to some of those conclusions as well. And I think there's emotion on the other side as well concerning some of the stipulations being made regarding the development. And so my request is that we be as transparent as possible regarding absolutely everything. I think that it's important that we talk about the numbers of the studies with respect to the noise, potential noise pollution, the studies regarding the density issues, the studies regarding the crime potential, whether or not it will be mitigated or propagated. Those are all things that are very, very important, and I think the data doesn't lie. So my encouragement is twofold. My encouragement is for Signal Hill Petroleum, which of course we appreciate you being here. You have made some significant contributions to the city, and I think it goes without saying that I'm very thankful for that. But it also goes to us as well. It's incumbent upon all of us as a community to be able to come up with very real facts that speak very clearly to us. And my encouragement is, let the facts be the final court of arbitration, not the emotion. And so if the facts stipulate that the noise pollution is a problem, if the facts stipulate that the density is a problem, if the facts stipulate that the view obstructions are a problem, then we need to walk according to that. If they don't, we need to go the other way.
Thank you, Mr. Cadiz.
Thank you so much.